So now we're going to add the base panel to our lining. So we have our two lining panels, both of which have that lovely bit of facing at the top. One has all the pockets in, and we have our base panel. Now the first thing to do is to fold your lining panels in half to find the centre and mark it. I've just put a little tiny snip into my seam allowance on both of my lining panels. Oh, daisy. And we are going to mark the quarter marks on our base as well. And yes, I am franking using interfacing. It's too expensive not to. So I've got a mark that's halfway, so that's 2 inches. And this is 7 inches from one short end or the other short end, because this is 14 inches long. So mark your quarter marks. It will make life a lot easier for the next part. Take one of your lining panels, doesn't matter which, lay your base panel right sides together onto the lining panel, matching up those central marks, and just pop a clip there. Now before we go any further, I'm going to do the same as I did with the exterior, in so much as I'm going to make a little mark that is 3/8 of an inch in from the side down here in the corner of my base panel, because I'm going to start my stitching 3/8 of an inch. Did I say 3/4? I meant 3/8. I do apologise. 3/8 of an inch in. I'm going to do that in all 4 corners because it's easier to do now than it is to try and do it once I've got it half stitched. It just gives me a guide for where I'm starting and stopping. It's really easy. I'm a great one for eyeballing, but sometimes eyeballing isn't the best way to do it. And for this, if we don't get it exactly right, the base won't fit, and that would be very bad, because this all fits together perfectly if you put it together properly and you stitch where it's supposed to be. If you get carried away and stitch right the way across, it won't. So I'm going to stitch from that 3/8 of an inch mark that I've made to the other 3/8 of an inch mark that I've made, using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Let me just shorten my stitch length a little bit. And I'm stitching all the way across. Until I get to my 3/8 of an inch mark, when I will then stop stitching. Now on the other side, so this side that's not attached, I'm just going to mark probably about the width of my pocket, actually, because I'm not going to stitch between those 2 marks. So I'm going to take my second lining panel and I'm going to lay, oh, that'll be the postman, but I'm going to ignore him. I'm going to lay my first lining panel on top, and I'm pulling out that base. So, no, excuse me, I'm going to have to go and answer the door. It's great, isn't it? You rush to the door, only to find your husband's already there, and he's not for you anyway. So I've got my second lining panel and I'm laying it right sides together with the first one. Let me just move that camera down slightly. So it's right sides together. I've pulled that base panel out, and I'm matching up the centre on that long side with the centre mark on my lining panel. And in exactly the same way as I just did, I'm going to stitch along this edge, but I'm only going to stitch up to those marks that I've made. So I'm only going to stitch this bit and this bit, not the whole way along. I'm going to leave a gap. That's one. Two. And now we've got this huge piece with a hole in the middle. So now I'm going to take my two lining panels, the front and back lining panels, forget about the base, we're just going to kind of pull that out of the way, and I'm going to match the sides. You need to be very careful and make sure that you match where those two panels meet perfectly, and pop a clip in there, because that will, when you're looking in the bag, if you haven't got those lined up, it will look a little strange. So continue to clip down the sides. And you do exactly the same on the other side, making sure that you match those seams where you joined the two panels together, the lining and the facing. It's funny how just that tiny little detail, just making sure that those are lined up, can make all of the difference to the inside of your bag. Not having them lined up will catch your eye and bother you. It bothers me, so it would bother me, so I'm assuming it would bother everybody. Okay, now we're going to stitch up the sides using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is a little bit bulky when we go over those seams where we join those two panels together. So go slowly. If you need to, use a hump jumper. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to start at the top this time. So why are we making our lining, or constructing our lining differently than we're constructing the outside? Basically because to reduce the bulk in the corners. Our bag, the exterior of our bag, has thick seams on all of the sort of seams on the sides, and I didn't want to add to that by adding lining seams as well. That just makes it almost impossible to top stitch. So we're constructing the lining in a slightly different method so that the seams will all be offset. So there won't be any double thickness seams to go through. So we've stitched up the sides, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of roll this a little bit, because what I want to do is press those side seams open. And you do have to kind of manipulate it a little bit to get to it, but it is important to do that. It will make the inside of your bag look so much better. So if you've used a faux leather for the exterior and thus a faux leather for your facing on the top of this, do be careful, don't press that, because that will not survive. So I'm just pressing that side seam open. It does take a little bit of kind of jiggery pokery to get to it, because that's my pocket. But I've got a piece of fabric behind there. I was going to say that's not supposed to be there. What's that? Where's that come from? So I'm just pressing that open all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to do the same on the other side. This may, for some people, may seem like a step too far. I promise you it's not. It will make it easier. There was a discussion in a British bag making group that I make, that I admin the other day, about ironing, and people say, oh no, I only ever iron when I'm sewing. I don't iron clothes or anything else. Now, if you're feeling really like you want to go to town, you can also open up this seam along the bottom. sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Because this fabric is quite thick, I'm going to, just because I think it will sit better if I do. So there we go. So now I've opened up my seams on the side, I've opened up that seam on the bottom, and we're almost good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my hand inside of my lining, I'm going to splay out my fingers, and I'm going to match that side seam with that central mark on the base. So I'm matching the side seam, which I've opened, with the central mark on the base, and I'm going to pop a clip in. And I'm going to pop a clip either side. That central one. Now what you will find is that there's a kind of an extra little bit, and it's difficult to get it kind of round into that corner. So what you might want to do is take a small snip into the side panel that just allows you to get that sitting in. It's millimeters. I'm not going even as far as the seam allowance, and I'm just snipping just at the end of my stitching along the side of the base. I'm going to actually do that on all 4 of those corners, just to help ease those sides in. So again, on the other side, I'm matching my mark on the base with the open seam on the side. I'm clipping, and having done my little cut, it clips so much easier and it folds beautifully. It should all fit just nicely, and it does. There we go. And then I'm going to stitch along here between the end of that mark and the beginning of that mark. So you're going to be basically stitching to complete the rectangle of the base, if you like, on the base. So back stitching a couple of stitches, and finishing stitching at the 3/8 of an inch mark. So you're starting your stitching, let's just get rid of that, at the 3/8 of an inch mark, and finishing your stitching at the 3/8 of an inch mark. So you're not going right away across, you're just going up to that 3/8 of an inch mark. I'm going to do exactly the same at the other end, and the other corner. So it's worth trying to make sure that your seam allowance stays, on the side stays open as you stitch across it. It just helps to make that bottom bit sit nicely. So there we have it. Our base is sewn in. It's nicely square, and then we've got that big gap. So I shall come back and show you how we do in the next stage.